tell me what the pianist trick is in organ for warming up their hands. Oh, coffee. Those next time. It's a great pleasure to be here with you around the piano and around what's most dear to us, music. It's incredible when you think that most of us here in this room, we've dedicated our lives to music. And today, I decided that I wanted to do more of a free-flowing exploration. Because as I was preparing what I was going to present, what I was going to talk about, I realized that I was falling into a common trap that I think lots of you are very familiar with as musicians. That is, for example, many times we start out with something like this that's not music at all, it's just paper and black ink, and we start to make decisions. How are we going to articulate this? How are we going to play this dynamic? What not to do? We try to carve out this perfect performance. And in doing so, everything gets narrower and narrower. Because to decide, the literal meaning of the word to decide is to cut off, to cut away. So in a way, we're cutting away possibilities. And our performance, or our idea of the performance, becomes narrower to the point where it feels like you're wearing a straitjacket. And then we perform with the straitjacket on. And you're curious why you started out with a piece that gave you so much, that was so inspiring, and suddenly there's no inspiration, and if you go down that path, you might even end up to the point where you think, well, what does it all matter? I mean, who cares? Right? So I realized in doing that this brings us to the heart of the matter, which is what I like to call the story behind the notes, the meaning behind it, the story that music tells us, the language of music. As Grace mentioned, I live in New York. I have students, piano students who come. My wife and I also present house concerts from our home. So we have people who come to listen to musicians perform. And I always ask myself that question, why do people come? Why do my students come to the piano lessons? Well, one answer could be that their parents force them to. I try not to leave that out. So if that's not the case, then it has to be that it's because it's meaningful. It's meaningful to them. And for it to be meaningful, in the first line, it has to be meaningful to you. That's something we always have to keep in mind. When I was in middle school, I remember in middle school was a moment when I realized that I wanted to pursue music professionally, not just as a hobby. And so I thought, okay, well, I need to understand music, because I want to perform, I want to compose, I want to do all these things, so let me understand this. And back then, my way of wanting to understand something was to read books and enroll in classes, and back then it meant taking theory classes. I thought if I take theory classes, I will understand the music. Job done. And I remember this deep frustration after every theory class, that I didn't feel that I was any closer to any understanding. On the contrary, it always just felt like I was learning a lot of new terms. Suddenly there were all these different scales, not just major and minor scales. All these different scales, all these different harmonies, all these cadences. I would learn the terms, but wouldn't necessarily understand how it all connects. And with time, I realized that this is what fascinates me, is to find the thread that connects it all, instead of looking at the multitude of things, to find the source, the origin, how it can all be brought back to what connects it. So I'd like to explore a little bit of that today. In other words, it's finding the simplicity in the complexity of things. It's looking for the seed that generates everything. And that's a common idea in this musical tradition of the last few centuries of tonal music. The musical idea, the Austrian composer Arne Arnold Schoenberg spent his life looking for that and talking about that. And particularly following his traditions from Bach, Mozart, Beethoven. That's why Schoenberg saw himself as a kind of natural evolution of that tradition. A lot of people had a hard time understanding that because his music appears to be so different. Yet it was the same principle. What is the original tiny musical idea that creates a large work of music that generates all this expression? So, for example, you can take a simple chord, and I can see this simply as a collection, a bunch of notes collected. But I can also see these notes as being in a specific relationship to each other. And that the nature of this relationship is very different than the nature of this relationship or so today I'd like to start out just by exploring the quality and the nature of this relationship. And I need your help for that. I'd like to ask you to join me and just hum and sing a constant. If you run out of air, just breathe and come back in. So, like a yoga class, let's just get a constant or whatever vowel you like. And then listen to the sound and listen how it relates to the harmony itself. This duality that we create, the sense of stability, harmony, the sense of activity, something that wants to move, to resolve. You can use different terms for that: stable, active, just said, tension, release, dissonance, consonance is what we use in musical terms, accord, discord. I like to, the word accord, not accord, accord, opposite of discord, is interesting. I grew up in Switzerland, I grew up speaking French and German. So in German, accord is the word that's used for harmony, chord. But in French, and the origin of the word is to be in agreement, to bring into agreement. So, accorder is the word that's used for tuning, to tune your instrument, to tune your strings. Literally means bringing your instrument, bringing your strings into agreement. Well, into agreement with what? Of course, into agreement with each other. But I think into agreement also with a kind of natural order. If you want to bring it back to the beginning, you start, usually you tune your instrument in fifths or fourths or sometimes in thirds. So following the natural order of the yoga zones. And we get this agreement, this tuning. So I think it's not by mistake that a piece like Rheingold begins as this kind of musical origin story. where literally we start with just one pitch flat. And then the fifth is introduced. And gradually more. Third, first time. And the musical birth of harmony. It's not so interesting on the piano because really the whole evolution is in the timbre, but there is soon a little more rhythmic melodic to the so on. Builds up and grows for about 15 minutes, but we never leave this stable tonality of E flat, which makes sense, of course, because in the beginning of the Rheingold, things are in their natural order. The gold is where it's supposed to be under the Rhine, and of course things change and get thrown out of whack once already steals that gold. But if you want to follow that story, you have to dedicate 4 long nights watching the whole ring cycle. So this is one pole of this ballad. There was a Bavarian pianist, Stefan Mittisch, whose work, fortunately, is not available in the English language because everything he did was in German. But for many years, he gave introductions at Bayreuth for the operas that were being performed. One thing that he did also is did a lot of research in comparing the tonalities, the keys of pieces, and making lots of connections outside of the music, connections with zodiac sign and what they represent. So that's a big topic, and we won't go into that, but I'll just mention as we go through tonalities, these associations. So E flat major, we have festivity, origins, origin of myth. So it works very nicely for Bible. On the other side of that pole, we have discord, does not follow the natural order. The music there tends to go against the grain. So we have something like that. hear this music, this chromatism, pulling you down, entering the underworld, and all these beautiful, but rich, and dense chromatic dissonances. So having established these two poles, in between, we have this whole playground where tonal music and meaning can happen. In this constant dance and flux and transition between tension and resolution. And so we can play with that. And this is an example where you can put meaning into theory. So even when we take a simple dominant tonic resolution, that's already a microcosm of these two poles, of the distance and its resolution. And if you take the dominant, take a major scale, we take the two most active tones in that scale. The fourth scale degree, which is being pulled down to its stable neighbor, the third. And the seventh, leading tone, very active tone, right back to the tonic. Together they form cluster, very active cluster. Most resolve there is dominant, tonic, bass. Now the same motion resolving here can be reinterpreted as a different harmony. If I change the bass to an A and an A minor. So this same motion can also resolve deceptively. Or it would be in 5 on A minor, and that's driven, motivated by the same force. And now, deceptive cadence. Again, that's a very interesting term, interesting word, because it tells us something. What it tells us is that we're being deceived. Well, deceived from what? We're being deceived from our expectations of how things are supposed to unfold, how the music is supposed to go. And I think that's fascinating when you think about it, because that means that when a composer writes a piece of music, she or he is really writing two pieces of music. There's the music, the piece of music, how it's supposed to go. Then there's the actual piece that's being written that departs from this idea. So you have always these two pieces existing in parallel, and creating within itself a sort of tension and dissonance between the expected flow of music and what actually happens. So, I think this is something that's crucial in teaching students, because for the teachers here, I'm sure you're very familiar with this experience. You have a student plays a piece, everything right. All the right notes, right rhythms, right dynamics, nothing wrong. You can't say anything. But you can tell that she or he are not really hearing the music, not really connecting to it. And so I think that's precisely because the understanding of what should happen is not clear and is not contrasting the actual performance. So I'll show you what I mean. Here's the beginning of a where time is not. So if I play them as if the music is supposed to be that way, it doesn't quite work. So I'm going to play the rest as if it's how the music is supposed to unfold. It will sound like that. rewrite them going according to the expectations. So what Haydn should have written would have been something like this. But it's a very mundane and banal piece now. So what makes this beginning unique and special is in the backdrop of the expected flow of the music we have. There's a big one here because not only do you get the interruption, but you also get the separative resolution, because again, here, what Haydn should have written would have been something like. So try to hear this. Try to expect that as we're listening to. Deception in dynamic, because after being left hanging here, you would expect something a bit more decisive to break up the tension. Right, but instead, we get very subtle piano, this whole beginning. Such a tease, isn't he? That's why we love Haydn. So full of grace and elegance and just good humored jest and wit. Of course, Haydn resolves this tension between the expected flow of the music and what he actually writes at the end of the sonata, where you do hear the theme with the continuous flow of music. They're wrong notes. It's supposed to be wrong notes. These are actual wrong notes. Here we get this flash between tonic and dominant at the same time. Very big tension at the end. So, these are some of the ways the composers are having fun with us. Speaking of expectation, playing with our expectations. Nowadays, we can be so familiar with the works of music that we play, and you have to keep in mind that we have a very different relationship to the music that we play than the audiences and musicians of those days who were playing contemporary music all the time, and who were, in many cases, hearing those words, the audiences, for the first time. And today, we already expect the pieces the way we know them to be. And so sometimes we can overlook what makes a piece shocking or surprising. I think a good example of that is Beethoven's Third Symphony. Because in those days, when it was at its premiere in 1805, it was a difficult piece of music for the audience. Nowadays, Third Symphony, we go listen, we have a nice dinner afterwards with friends. But back then, it was kind of shocking what he did. Not only was it the longest symphony written at this point, but it was also action-packed and full of dissonances that went beyond what had been written up to this point, and in a way, a very anti-classical approach, because the classical ideal was we establish a key, we spend some time first getting situated, getting comfortable, getting oriented with that key, and then gradually, very subtly, a little shift, something changes. So almost you're not supposed to notice it, and we find ourselves in a different key. But Beethoven gives us, that's all you get. E flat major, you get it, and then you go on. It's famous theme. So it's easy to hear this and think, oh, it's just a nice theme. And now I realize that already in this thing there's something rather shocking, which is we start out perfectly stable, harmonious world, E flat major, again, this is like the origin. Immediately followed by this chromaticism comes way too soon, way too early. And suddenly what's happening here, together with the harmonies, where does this bring us? It brings us to G minor. So there is again this duality here, and in this theme, Beethoven, they are right next to each other. There's a Buddhist koan I heard once, I'm paraphrasing it, but it's something along the lines of the difference between heaven and hell. It's just the width of the hair. And I think this is what you have here, this clash separated just by the width of the hair between these two poles. And this is going to have, of course, tremendous implications throughout the piece, because this first movement is this battle and clash between these two sides. If we listen to how the development begins, where we find ourselves in the development. So I'll tell you the end of the exposition. this realm and reach a climax where all hell breaks loose. The question now, of course, is how do we come out of this? And the transition back into the recapitulation is almost too abrupt, because at the end of the development, it doesn't seem like we're out of it. Because if we went through all this development and we had all this evolution, do you want to tell me that now we're just going to head back up here? This is where Beethoven is just fascinating how consequent he is in his musical narrative. Because he understands that, no, we can't just have the recapitulation, just repeat the theme, because that clash, that issue, that problem was there, built in that theme. So he has to show us the way out of that. And he does that with just these slides. F major, nature, pastoral, it's the key of this pastoral symphony. And this is how lights, the theme that's being repeated if F major appears. Of this transformation that has happened. What this reminds me of is when, to bring it back to sort of a more personal realm, but when you have something in your life that keeps showing up, something negative, some sort of negativity, making the same mess over and over again, and you can see it happen every time it shows up, you make the same mistake. But maybe one day you manage to take a different turn. And you know when it happens. You know that something important has happened because for the first time you found your way out of that. And I feel this is this jubilation that comes out of that, of having overcome this obstacle. That's the heroic element in this. And then everything is clear for Beethoven to end. two very clear points. We start from a clear point of stability, and we know that we come back to it. This doesn't always have to unfold in this manner, of course. If you compare Clara Beethoven's reading with something like that. Maybe this is an unanswered question, and we could expect the answer. But we don't get this answer. Recently I had a high school piano student who came, and sometimes I demonstrate a little thing that I checked in with her. I said, so, how was that for you? And she gave me a thumbs up, a big smile, and said, I didn't yawn. So I thought, I'll take that. That's a badge of honor. High school students. But this is how Wagner keeps you from yawning, although a lot of people would disagree with it. Some people have a hard time, but at least this is how it tends to keep you invested invested in the drama over the course of 4 hours here, because if you want to find out how this resolves and in what key we are, you have to wait till the very end, where Isolde dies her Liebestod. So all this unresolved tension, it makes sense then for the subject of the opera, which is this unfulfilled, unlived desire, latent desire. But Tristan dies, and Isolde dies out of her love, her Liebestod, and it seems that for Wagner, this is the resolution of desire. This is the resolution of all of it. But we also get to hear the harmonic and the musical resolution of their own. B major. We are in B major. This key associated here with faithfulness, purity. So we started not knowing where we were and had to come to the very end to come to this point of rest, stability. Of course, as we leave the realm of tonal music, there's a very different way of representing tension and resolution. Changes is that resolution. Resolution doesn't have to be necessarily harmonic resolution, it doesn't have to be tonal resolution. Because what it implies is that there's a different way of resolving tension. That it's not that it has to be resolved harmonically, but if you embrace the tension as a sensation of stability, that in itself can be felt as a resolution. And there's a beautiful moment, or turning point, if you want, in a little piece by Scriabin, which is opus 57. His first piece is called Désir. So the title is Desire. The beginning of it is very much reminds you of this Tristan beginning. directions. Literally one part dissolves, not the rest. Isn't that a perfect definition of desire? Being pulled in opposite directions, like in Mozart's Don Giovanni, Lasciare vorrei e non vorrei. I'd like to, but I don't. I want, but I don't do it. And this is, you hear this sonic dominant blend also at the end of Liszt's ballades. We stay with that tension. So, to close out today, I just like to play this chord at the end of Scriabin again, and just bathe in it. Just hear these two parts pulling you, but at the same time being complete and at rest. And enjoy this beautiful sonata.
Presentation. Thank you so much. I would encourage everyone who hasn't looked Cyrus's website up and his YouTube channel. There's a lot to explore. He does some very creative, interesting work. So I wasn't sure what direction you would like to go with this presentation. So going off a little bit into another direction. How would you like to tell us about some of the main features of your journey into improvisation and creating without score? Because it's what you're showing us today is so fascinating how with score, it's just a blueprint for the depths that can be climbed and mountains that can be climbed. So much more than the mere notes on the score is there if you care to explore and experiment and try different things and really listen deeply and feel deeply and question deeply. But what if you don't have a score and you're alone with your piano or your musical instrument and you're alone with a student, especially a beginning student, because I think a lot of kids do get to college level music theory, and okay, this is the defaulted chord, and this is how you get it, and it resolves quickly. But it doesn't excite them, it doesn't mean anything to them. So don't you think, based on what little I've researched about you, don't you think your journey as a composer, as an improviser, has helped you tremendously in the dimensions that it's helped you develop?
Yes. Certainly. I think spending time with the piece, I mean, you were asking specifically more about improvisation without music, but
Yes, and how from boyhood to college, high school to college, to where you are now, what you're in your 40s now.
it's around the corner.
So I don't know, but I mean, it's a never-ending journey, but I'd be interested to hear you reflect back on your journey.
Yes. You know, improvisation, composition, performance, all that, it really, there shouldn't be these strict boundaries. And nowadays we tend to specialize so much on one or the other. So yes, in this sense, I've done several of these things and they're always present. But when it comes to music with score, I think it's really important to spend time with the piece, not practicing it, but just kind of messing around. And because there's always discovery that can happen there. But you know, the moment you say, okay,